Hi, I'm Robert Orm, and I'll be reading you today's edition of the Fall River Herald, dated Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Ugliest House in America by Dan Medeiros. Does Somerset have the ugliest house in America? That's the word on the street, or at least on the HGTV show Ugliest House in America. The show finds some of the tackiest, gaudiest, most bizarre homes around, with the ugliest one each episode winning $150,000 in renovations. Host Retta, of Parks and Recreation fame, landed in Somerset for a recent episode, where she ended up on Lord's Road to spotlight a house she said looks like a building on a school campus or a bank. But beauty is in the eye of the mortgage holder. Owner Gerline Norborn, who paid $692,500 for the house in 2023, says she loves it. "I like things that are unique," she says in the show. The house was built in 1962, and its exterior is very much of that era. It almost has a brutalist vibe, with half of the house shaped like a trapezoid made of what appears to be beige concrete, and the other half clad in stone paneling. Flanking the doors are mirrored panels. The show spends significant time on the interior, which still has a great deal of 1960s-70s era flair. A dining room walled off by breeze blocks and vertical strips of mirror, a triangle-shaped kitchen, and a conversation room with what used to be a fountain wall. The house appears to have a flat asphalt roof, which Gerline notes has caused some roof leakage. Still, Retta and Gerline spar throughout the episode, with Gerline defending much of the decor and Retta calling the upscale style a hot mess. The house was previously owned by the Campos family. Manuel Leite Campos was owner of Sonho do Lar, a Portuguese furniture store, along with Chalmore Furniture and an Ethan Allen franchise. The fountain wall still has Campos written out in tile. Every episode features 3 houses, with Retta deciding which house will get the $150,000 renovation. Gerline's house was up against a whimsical nightmare in New Jersey that Retta called a crafty cottage of confusion and delusion protected by the devil, and a former church in Hampton, Massachusetts, with a working pipe organ still built into it. To find out which house won, check out Ugliest Houses in America, Season 6, Episode 4 on HGTV and streaming on Max. Company to get $1.8 million in tax cuts to add jobs by Emily Sherney. A pharmaceutical company nestled in Fall River's Industrial Park is one of 33 life science companies in the state to receive tax incentive awards secured by the Healey-Driscoll administration and the Massachusetts Life Sciences Center. True to MLSC's latest tax incentive program intended to bolster life science industry jobs, with a goal of adding 1,519 in the state, Invagen Pharmaceuticals Incorporated will receive a $1,795,000 share of the $29.9 million tax incentive awards, and is on track to create 70 new jobs in the city. The world looks to Massachusetts for the future of life sciences because we have built an ecosystem where innovative research, exceptional talent, and public-private partnerships come together to drive significant progress, said Governor Maura Healey in a release. We are creating new jobs and ensuring that the next generation of scientific breakthroughs are being developed right here in our state. Invagen, a subsidiary company of New Jersey-based Kipla USA Limited, manufactures metered dose inhalation products in its Unit 4 facilities located at 927 Current Road. According to Kipla's website, the Fall River facility is one of 4 that boasts a comprehensive filling capacity, meanwhile tailoring products to the U.S. market. Created in 2007, the MLSC is an economic development investment agency dedicated to supporting the expansion of life sciences in Massachusetts. Since its inception, it has funneled $1 billion in life sciences through public-private funding initiatives. The MLSC tax incentive program is offered to companies throughout the state involved in life sciences research and development and commercial manufacturing. This year, the program's awardees were selected for their advancement to scientific innovation in drug discovery, biopharma, digital health, diagnostics, and medical devices, in addition to their economic contribution and their ability to improve lives with groundbreaking work, said Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll. Their successes are a shining example of why Massachusetts continues to lead the nation in life sciences. The MLSC jointly administers the program with the state's Department of Revenue. Awardees are required to maintain projected employment commitments over a 3-year period. Out of the 33 companies receiving tax breaks, 18 account for 48% of new life sciences jobs introduced to communities outside of the competitive markets of Boston and Cambridge. Through this program, 19,800 new jobs have attracted applicants since 2007. Invigen joins companies like Boston's Vertex Pharmaceuticals Incorporated, Lila Sciences Incorporated of Cambridge, and Integra Life Sciences Corporation in Braintree in a roster of recipients who are set to receive between $125,000 and $5.61 million, and have pledged to add between 5 and 300 jobs. November 2024, Healy signed the Mass Leads Act, an economic development bill that effectively increased the statutory cap from $30 million to $40 million for life sciences tax incentives, with targeted reforms applied to the program in the advent of boosting the state's successful life sciences sector. To maximize the new $40 million statutory cap in the Mass Leads Act, this new round of incentives that seeks to competitively award the remaining $10.1 million available for this year to applicant life sciences companies for net job increases. The application period for the next MLSC tax incentive cycle is open between June 12th and July 16th. Restaurant and Cocktail Lounge closes until further notice, by Ashley Schuler. Those with plans to visit Counting House will have to put those on pause for the time being. The upscale restaurant and craft cocktail lounge located in the historic Durfee Union Mills complex, which serves up turn-of-the-century vibes with a modern twist, announced its temporary closure this week. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be temporarily closed until further notice, reads a June 19th post on the business's Facebook page. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause and appreciate your understanding during this time. Owners Tina Socia and Brian Corey transformed the historic freestanding granite building number 12, once the heart of the mill's operations, into a chic dining spot with a unique concept that debuted just after Christmas. The restaurant pays homage to the Prohibition era as well as Fall River's rich history, and features a menu focused on creative craft cocktails and drinks and tapas-style shareable plates with Italian, Portuguese, and Mediterranean influences. The Counting House also features a private dining room equipped with a dedicated liquor locker for members. The Facebook announcement did not indicate what prompted the hiatus, or when they were anticipating reopening Counting House, but advised patrons to keep an eye on their website and social media for updates. We are working diligently to resolve the situation and will keep you updated as more information becomes available, the post reads. And if you've recently made reservations at the Pleasant Street restaurant, you may want to double-check those plans. According to the Counting House Post, the reservation system on their website was still active and accepting reservations, so that booking may not stand. We apologize for any inconvenience, the Facebook post states. The Counting House website refers inquiries about reservations to the phone number 401-648-5134. 22 South Coast students wins college scholarships, by Emily Shirney. The South Coast Community Foundation, a public charity serving over 41 local communities in 4 counties for the last 30 years, awarded scholarships to 22 high school and college students from the Fall River area on May 27th. In a joyful and heartfelt ceremony that honored 120 students with more than $800,000 in scholarship awards, schools whose past and present students were recipients included Argosy Collegiate Charter School, BMC Durfee High School, Bristol County Agricultural High School, and Diamond Regional Vocational Technical High School. Students from Somerset Berkeley Regional and Westport High Schools were among those honored with scholarships, and who are selected by a panel of 130 volunteers not only on account of academic merit, but also for displaying qualities of perseverance, leadership, and deep community engagement, a release shared with the Herald News read. More than 70 individual, family, organization, and business donors contributed to establish scholarship funds. To Dr. Melanie Edwards Tavares, President and CEO of the Foundation, this year's scholarship recipients shared powerful stories of perseverance, purpose, and hope. They are a true reflection of what makes our region extraordinary, she said. Since 1995, the South Coast Community Foundation is the only community foundation dedicated solely to southeastern Massachusetts and has distributed over $63 million in humanitarian, educational, and cultural grants, $5.6 million of which have been awarded in scholarships. Through its commitment to equity, collaboration, and opportunity, the foundation brings people, resources, and ideas together, driving impact and strengthening communities, the release read. Argosy Collegiate Charter School's Kali Bastos joined Durfee's Victoria Bourgeot, Obier Herrera, Ethan Horseman, Armand Paiva, and Zara Sheik, among other college and high school students who received scholarships. Sarah Ashley of Bristol Aggie was honored with a scholarship. Diamond's Harley Cipollini and Jayla Pelletier were recognized with scholarships to continue their education. Gabriella Aruda, Isabel Borges, Ava McDermott, Hunter Pearson, and Corey Tickell of Somerset Berkeley Regional High School were among those named. From Westport High School, Emma Bissett, Angelo Gonzalez, Daniel Hughes, Dylan Kirby, Samantha Medeiros, Samantha Rodriguez, Owen Sullivan, and Neil Walker were recognized as 2025 recipients. Hesketh, Tehran's nuclear program obliterated, by Kim Hejmalgard, Janine Santucci, Tom Vandenbroek, Aaron Mansfield, and Sybil Mays Osterman. Defense Secretary Pete Hesketh said U.S. bombers completely obliterated Iran's 3 major nuclear complexes at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan in a night strike on June 21st. The order we received from our commander-in-chief was focused. It was powerful, and it was clear. We devastated the Iranian nuclear program, Hezgeth said. President Donald Trump announced the airstrikes on Iranian uranium enrichment sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan in a June 21st Truth Social post, saying that all planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. In an address to the nation from the White House hours after announcing the attacks, Trump said Iran could face far greater attacks if it does not make peace with Israel and the United States. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace, Trump told the nation. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. Trump said Iran has called for death to Israel and America for years. He has previously said Iran can't be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons. There will either be peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days, he said. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill, he said. The United States remains on high alert for any retaliation from Tehran, General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said at a June 22nd Pentagon briefing. Our forces remain on high alert and are fully postured to respond to any Iranian retaliation or proxy attacks, which would be an incredibly poor choice. We will defend ourselves. The safety of our service members and civilians remains our highest priority, Kane said. Army General Eric Kurilla, the commander of U.S. Central Command, has elevated force protection measures in the region, Kane said, especially in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf. There are about 40,000 American troops in the region. There has so far been no independent assessment of that assertion from nuclear watchdogs, international officials, or others with direct information of the situation on the ground. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is the main window for how the world assesses the scale and evolution of Iran's nuclear program, has not commented. Hezgeth said B-2 stealth bombers in a mission called Operation Midnight Hammer went in and out without the world knowing at all. In that way, it was historic. The strikes did not target Iranian troops or the Iranian people, Hezgeth said. Trump seeks peace, and Iran should take that path, he said. Hezgeth noted that fighter pilots and sailors aboard ships and submarines joined the attack. The 3 nuclear targets were struck from 6:40 p.m. to 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time on June 21st, Kane said. He said the United States was currently unaware of any shots fired at the U.S. strike package on the way in or on the way out of Iran. All 3 nuclear sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction, initial assessments indicate, Kane said. Israeli President Isaac Herzog said June 22nd that the United States is acting in its own interests and declined to say whether Israel would need additional resources. We are not dragging America into a war, and we are leaving aid to the decision of the President of the United States and to the team, Herzog said in an interview on CNN. Herzog said Washington's decision to attack Iran was made because the Iranian nuclear program was a clear and present danger to the security interests of the free world, and the United States is the leader of the free world. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the bombings, saying the decision could lead the Middle East toward a future of prosperity and peace. America has been truly unsurpassed, Netanyahu said in a video statement on June 21st. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. The United Nations nuclear watchdog will hold an emergency meeting in Vienna on June 23rd. The International Atomic Energy Agency, created in 1957 amid growing concern over nuclear weapons, called for an end to hostilities so that it can continue inspections in Iran. In view of the increasingly serious situation in terms of nuclear safety and security, the Board of Governors will meet in an extraordinary session tomorrow, which I will address, Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi said. The sites targeted by the U.S. strikes contained nuclear material in the form of uranium enriched to different levels, the IAEA said, according to its most recent information before Israel's strikes on Iran on June 13th. The material may cause radioactive and chemical contamination within the facilities that were hit, the IAEA said. Grossi said no health impacts outside the targeted sites are expected after the U.S. strikes. I have repeatedly stated that nuclear facilities should never be attacked, Grossi said. Iran's next move is being closely watched. The country has already ramped up its rhetoric. Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interest, and people, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said. Ahead of the strikes, Tehran signaled that if the Pentagon were to join Israel's war, U.S. military bases and Navy ships in the region could be attacked. Iran has a large arsenal of drones and ballistic missiles. It has been using these on Israel for days. It launched a fresh wave of missiles toward Israel hours after the bombing started. Iran might even opt for a diplomatic route, which Trump was encouraging prior to authorizing the attack. Iranians have been intermittently cut off from the world since the start of Israel's air war on its military and nuclear sites more than a week ago, now joined by the United States. On June 22nd, NetBlocks, an organization that monitors global internet access, reported that connectivity in Iran again collapsed in the hours before the U.S. strikes. NetBlocks also reported that Trump's Truth Social platform was experiencing international outages for many users, a scenario it said was not related to country-level internet disruptions or filtering. Republican and Democratic members of the Congress delivered swift reactions. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Louisiana, said Trump's action prevents the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, which chants death to America, from obtaining the most lethal weapon on the planet. The president gave Iran's leader every opportunity to make a deal, but Iran refused to commit to a nuclear disarmament agreement. Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Roger Wicker, Mississippi, applauded the operation, but cautioned that the United States now faced several serious choices ahead. This war is Israel's war, not our war, but Israel is one of our strongest allies and is disarming Iran for the good of the world, said Senate Foreign Relations Chair Jim Risch, Idaho. This is not the start of a forever war. There will not be American boots on the ground in Iran. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, New York, said the attacks are a constitutional violation and calls Trump's strikes grounds for impeachment. The president's disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers, she said in the post on X, published shortly after Trump's White House address. This is not constitutional, Representative Thomas Massey, Kentucky, said on social media. He was referring to the power of Congress to declare war on foreign countries. While Congress is the only branch of government that has the power to declare war, however, presidents have engaged in foreign conflicts in recent decades under the executive authority to authorize defensive strikes. Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iran worry Gulf states. By Andrew McCaskill, Federico Macchioni, and Pesha Magid. Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear installations so far pose only limited risks of contamination, experts say. But they warn that any attack on the country's nuclear power station at Bushehr could cause a nuclear disaster. Israel says it is determined to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities in its military campaign, but that it also wants to avoid any nuclear disaster in a region that is home to tens of millions of people and produces much of the world's oil. U.S. forces struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites in a very successful attack, President Donald Trump said on June 21st. Fears of catastrophe rippled through the Gulf on June 19th when the Israeli military said it had struck a site in Bushehr on the Gulf Coast, home to Iran's only nuclear power station, only to say later that the announcement was a mistake. Israel has announced attacks on nuclear sites in Natanz, Isfahan, Iraq, and Tehran itself. Trump said U.S. forces struck Iran's 3 principal nuclear sites, Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow. Israel and the United States say they aim to stop Iran building an atomic bomb. Iran denies ever seeking one. The international nuclear watchdog, IAEA, has reported damage to the uranium enrichment plant at Natanz, to the nuclear complex at Isfahan, including the uranium conversion facility, and to centrifuge production facilities in Karaj and Tehran. Israel has also attacked Iraq, also known as Kandab. The IAEA said Israeli military strikes hit the Kandab heavy water research reactor, which was under construction and had not begun operating, and damaged the nearby plant that makes heavy water. The IAEA said that it was not operational and contained no nuclear material, so there were no radiological effects. In an update of its assessment on June 20th, the IAEA said key buildings at the site were damaged. Heavy water reactors can be used to produce plutonium which, like enriched uranium, can be used to make an atomic bomb. Peter Bryant, a professor at the University of Liverpool in England who specializes in radiation protection science and nuclear energy policy, said he is not too concerned about fallout risks from the strike so far. He noted that the Iraq site was not operational, while the Natanz facility was underground and no release of radiation was reported. The issue is controlling what has happened inside that facility, but nuclear facilities are designed for that, he said. Uranium is only dangerous if it gets physically inhaled or ingested or gets into the body at low enrichments. Daria Dolsikova, a senior research fellow at London think tank RUSI, said attacks on facilities at the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle, the stages where uranium is prepared for use in a reactor, pose primarily chemical, not radiological risks. At enrichment facilities, UF6 or uranium hexafluoride is the concern. When UF6 interacts with water vapor in the air, it produces harmful chemicals, she said. The extent to which any material is dispersed would depend on factors including the weather, she added. In low winds, much of the material can be expected to settle in the vicinity of the facility. In high winds, the material will travel farther, but is also likely to disperse more widely. The risk of dispersal is lower for underground facilities. Simon Bennett, who leads the Civil Safety and Security Unit at the University of Leicester in the UK, said risks to the environment were minimal if Israel hit subterranean facilities because you are burying a nuclear material in possibly thousands of tons of concrete, earth, and rock. The major concern would be a strike on Iran's nuclear reactor at Bushehr. Richard Wakeford, honorary professor of epidemiology at the University of Manchester, said that while contamination from attacks on enrichment facilities would be mainly a chemical problem for the surrounding areas, extensive damage to large power reactors is a different story. Radioactive elements would be released either through a plume of volatile materials or into the sea, he added. James Acton, co-director of the Nuclear Policy Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said an attack on Bushehr could cause an absolute radiological catastrophe, but that attacks on enrichment facilities were unlikely to cause significant off-site consequences. Before uranium goes into a nuclear reactor, it is barely radioactive, he said. Bennett of the University of Leicester said it would be foolhardy for the Israelis to attack Bushehr because they could pierce the reactor, which would mean releasing radioactive material into the atmosphere. For Gulf states, the impact of any strike on Bushehr would be worsened by the potential contamination of Gulf waters, jeopardizing a critical source of desalinated potable water. In the United Arab Emirates, desalinated water accounts for more than 80% of drinking water, while Bahrain became fully reliant on desalinated water in 2016, with 100% of groundwater reserved for contingency plans, according to authorities. Qatar is 100% dependent on desalinated water. In Saudi Arabia, a much larger nation with a greater reserve of natural groundwater, about 50% of the water supply came from desalinated water as of 2023, according to the General Authority for Statistics. While some Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates have access to more than one sea to draw water from, countries like Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait are crowded along the shoreline of the Gulf with no other coastline. If a natural disaster, oil spill, or even a targeted attack were to disrupt a desalination plant, hundreds of thousands could lose access to fresh water almost instantly, said Nidal Hilal, professor of engineering and director of New York University, Abu Dhabi's Water Research Center. We've reached the halfway point of our program, and regular listeners are aware that at this stage of our broadcast, we move to the obituaries. Altino Manuel Olivier, 76, of Fall River, passed away Wednesday, June 18, 2025. He was the widower of Maria de Jesus Furtado Olivier. A visitation will be held Wednesday, June 25th, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. at the Oliviera Funeral Home, South Main Street, Chapel, 2064 South Main Street, Fall River, followed by funeral prayers at 10 a.m. Burial will follow in Notre Dame Cemetery. Africa Reducing Reliance on U.S. Dollar by Duncan Mariri. Africa's push for local currency payment systems, once little more than an aspiration, is finally making concrete gains, bringing the promise of less costly trade to a continent long hobbled by resource-sapping dollar transactions. but efforts to move away from the dollar face strong opposition and the threat of retaliation from President Donald Trump, who is determined to preserve it as the dominant currency for global trade. The move by Africa to create payment systems that do not rely on the greenback mirrors a push by China to develop financial systems independent of Western institutions. Countries like Russia, which face economic sanctions, are also keen for an alternative to the dollar. But while that movement has gained a sense of urgency due to shifting trade patterns and geopolitical realignments following Trump's return to the White House, African advocates for payment alternatives are making their case based on costs. Our goal, contrary to what people might think, is not de-dollarization, said Mike Ogbalu, Chief Executive of the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, or PAPSS, which allows parties to transact directly in local currencies, bypassing the dollar. If you look at African economies, you'll find that they struggle with availability for third-party global currencies to settle transactions, he said. Africa's commercial banks typically rely on overseas counterparts, through so-called correspondent banking relationships, to facilitate settlements of international payments. That includes payments between African neighbors. That adds significantly to transaction costs that, along with other factors like poor transport infrastructure, have made trade in Africa 50% more expensive than the global average, according to the UN Trade and Development Agency. It is also among the reasons so much of Africa's trade, 84% according to a report by Mauritius-based MCB Group, is with external partners rather than between African nations. The existing financial network that is largely dollar-based has essentially become less effective for Africa and costlier, said Daniel McDowell, a professor at Syracuse University in New York, specializing in international finance. According to data compiled by PAPSS, under the existing system of correspondent banks, a $200 million trade between two parties in different African countries is estimated to cost 10 to 30% of the value of the deal. The shift to homegrown payment systems could cut the cost of that transaction to just 1%. Systems like PAPSS allow a business in one country, Zambia for example, to pay for goods from another like Kenya, with both buyer and seller receiving payment in their respective currencies, rather than converting them into dollars to complete the transaction. Using currencies like the Nigerian naira, Ghanaian cedi, or South Africa's rand for intra-African trade payments may save the continent $5 billion a year in hard currency, Ogbalu told Reuters. Launched in January 2022 with just 10 participating commercial banks, PAPSS is today operational in 15 countries, including Zambia, Malawi, Kenya, and Tunisia, and now has 150 commercial banks in its network. We have also seen very significant growth in our transactions, Ogbalu said, without providing usage data. The International Finance Corporation, the World Bank's private sector leading arm, has, meanwhile, started issuing loans to African businesses in local currencies. It views the switch as imperative for their growth, relieving them from the currency risks of borrowing in dollars, said Ethiopi's Tafara, IFC's vice president for Africa. If they are not generating hard currency, a hard currency loan imposes a burden that makes it difficult for them to succeed, he said. Africa's campaign to boost regional payment systems has found a platform at the group of 20 major economies, with South Africa leading the charge as holder of the G20's rotating presidency. It held at least one session on boosting regional payment systems when South Africa hosted a meeting of G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. And South Africa wants to follow up the talk with concrete actions. The next meeting of G20 finance officials is scheduled for mid-July. Some of the most expensive corridors for cross-border payments are actually found on the African continent. Lesetja Kganyago, South Africa's central bank governor, told Reuters during a G20 meeting in Cape Town in February. For us to function as a continent, it's important that we start trading and settling in our own currencies. Talk of moving away from the dollar, either for trade or as a reserve currency, has drawn aggressive reactions from Trump, however. After BRICS, a grouping of nations including Russia, China, India, and Brazil, along with South African countries like South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia, weighed reducing dollar dependence and creating a common currency. Trump responded with threats of 100% tariffs. There is no chance that BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade or anywhere else, and any country that tries should say hello to tariffs and goodbye to America, he wrote on Truth Social in January. In the months since, Trump has demonstrated his willingness to use tariffs to pressure and punish allies and foes alike, a strategy that has upended global trade and geopolitics. No matter its intentions in moving to more local currency transactions, Syracuse University's McDowell said Africa will struggle to distance itself from more politically motivated de-dollarization efforts, like those led by China and Russia. The perception is likely to be that this is about geopolitics, he said. Hurricane season gets off to a perplexing start. By Doyle Rice and Dinah Voiles-Pulver. Hurricane Eric formed June 18th in the eastern Pacific Ocean, becoming the fifth named storm of the eastern Pacific season to date. A flurry of activity in sharp contrast with the tepid start to hurricane season in the Atlantic. By some counts, the eastern Pacific has been on a historic run, recording 5 named storms before the third week of June for the first time on record, said WPLG-TV 10 meteorologist Michael Lowry via his email newsletter June 17th. The activity was due in part to a large-scale climate pattern known as the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which is an eastward-moving disturbance of clouds, rainfall, winds, and pressure. It traverses the planet in the tropics and returns to its initial starting point in 30 to 60 days, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It, along with other obscure patterns such as Rossby and Kelvin waves, influences weather, including hurricane formation around the globe. Although some storms can cross over Central America from one ocean to the other, there isn't really an overall connection in activity, AccuWeather hurricane expert Alex De Silva said. Colorado State University meteorologist Phil Klotzbach agreed, noting in an email that, "There's not a lot that we can say tying in the fast start to the eastern North Pacific to what the season may portend for the Atlantic. The relationship between Atlantic hurricane activity and eastern North Pacific hurricane activity just off of the west coast of Mexico, as we've seen this year, is fairly weak," he said. Thus, the early activity in the Pacific isn't likely a harbinger of storms to come in the Atlantic. De Silva said the Madden-Julian Oscillation pulse made it to the eastern Pacific but fell apart before reaching the Atlantic. While the eastern Pacific is running about a month ahead of schedule with all of its activity, the Atlantic is on track for a typical to even slow start, Lowry said. Models are muted on any development chances for the basin into at least the middle part of next week, he said. The next chance of widespread storminess returning to the tropical Atlantic won't be until around the first week of July. A Kelvin wave, formerly known as a convectively coupled Kelvin wave, is thought to have interacted with a Rossby wave over the Americas, contributing to limited tropical development in the Atlantic basin, but creating a favorable pattern that helped spawn the formation of both Dahlia and Eric to the south of Mexico, according to the Climate Prediction Center. Kelvin waves, which can extend up to 4,000 miles in length and be thousands of miles wide, move along the equator in the same direction as the Mad and Julian, only faster, said Quentin Lawton, a postdoctoral fellow at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado. Perturbations inside the waves can encourage thunderstorms and rainfall. It turns out that these waves actually end up being really important for tropical cyclones, Lawton said. Vatican-backed report seeks financial reform. By Libby George. A commission launched by the late Pope Francis has outlined financial reforms it says could help to avert decades of lost development in poor countries that face onerous repayments as global public debts reach record levels. The Jubilee Commission report is published ahead of the once-a-decade United Nations Financing for Development conference that takes place in Seville, Spain, later in June. The environment for this Jubilee year campaign could hardly be more different than the last, 25 years ago, that yielded billions in historic debt forgiveness. Mariana Mazzucato, a University College London professor and member of the commission, said today's debt crisis was symptomatic of a broken investment model. The solution has to be public investment strategies that build productive capacity, domestic value added, and sustainable fiscal space, she said. The report recommends measures including more debt suspension initiatives and steps to ensure money from institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank does not end up flowing from countries to private creditors. It also urges legal changes in London and New York, the jurisdictions for most bond contracts, to disincentivize creditors from refusing to take part during debt restructurings. After the debt forgiveness that followed the previous Jubilee campaign, many developing countries, freed of their existing debt, turned to more expensive private lending, and China's lending ballooned. As a result, countries including Sri Lanka, Zambia, and Ghana slid into default. A wave of sovereign defaults unleashed by the COVID-19 pandemic and exacerbated by the pressure of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and a global rate-hiking cycle that boosted borrowing costs, largely crested last year. But the Commission said dozens of countries are still squeezing spending to repay debt, with long-term implications for development and social cohesion. Average interest costs for developing countries as a share of tax revenues has almost doubled since 2014, while 3.3 billion people, and more than half of Africans, live in countries that spend more on debt service than health. The system, the Commission's leaders said, traps countries in a cycle in which private lenders send cash when times are good, but quickly shut off access when global risk reemerges. When lenders of last resort, such as the IMF, send money, the Commission said that money often goes toward repaying creditors to avoid default. Martin Guzman, Commission co-chair and Argentina's former economy minister, said that created a problem for both creditors and debtors. They don't come to the table with the right conditions for engaging timely and sustainable restructurings, and that aggravates the development crisis, he said. FBI, Minnesota Suspect a Prepper, by Michael Loria. The man suspected of killing a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband in a brazen attack while dressed as a police officer is a doomsday prepper who set aside passports, guns, and hordes of cash in the event of a catastrophe, newly unsealed federal court documents show. Vance Bolter's wife relayed the doomsday plans after she was interviewed by police during a manhunt for Bolter after authorities say he shot 4 people on June 14th, according to the complaint filed in the U.S. District Court in Minnesota. During an interview, Bolter's wife identified that she had recently received a group text message from Bolter in a group text thread with their kids, FBI agent Terry Getch wrote. The text related something to the effect of they should prepare for war, they needed to get out of the house, and people with guns may be showing up to the house. Law enforcement stopped Bolter's wife while she was traveling with her 4 children to visit friends northwest of the metro area, the federal complaint said. In the car, officers found a safe, all of the children's passports, as well as Bolter's, about $10,000 in cash, a revolver pistol in the glove compartment, and a semi-automatic pistol in a cooler, the FBI says in the complaint. Bolter, 57, is accused of killing State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, and seriously wounding State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. The new information about Bolter and his family comes nearly a week after the attack that investigators say Bolter extensively researched and planned. He compiled a list of mostly Democratic state lawmakers and their addresses. He fitted his SUV with lights and a fake license plate to resemble a police squad car, and he purchased a silicone mask and a cache of weapons, according to a 20-page affidavit filed in federal court. Details about what Bolter's wife was carrying come after federal investigators revealed that Bolter sent multiple texts to her and the children hours after the shootings. In a group chat, he sent the following message at 6:18 a.m. Dad went to war last night. I don't want to say more because I don't want to implicate anybody. Around the same time, his wife received a separate message from Bolter. Words are not going to explain how sorry I am for this situation. There's going to be some people coming to the house armed and trigger happy, and I don't want you guys around. Bolter was arrested late June 15th, following the largest manhunt in Minnesota state history, authorities said. Federal prosecutors charged him with several counts of murder and stalking. Minnesota authorities say they believe Bolter impersonated law enforcement to gain access to the victims' homes, exchanged gunfire with police, and fled on foot outside Minneapolis. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called Hortman's killing a politically motivated assassination. At various times, Bolter has claimed to work in the food service industry. In other moments, he's claimed he runs large firms involved with security situations overseas, including Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. The recently unsealed court filing said Bolter worked at Red Lion, a security company and fishing outfit in Congo, Africa. On LinkedIn, Bolter called himself CEO of Red Lion, according to reporting by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, part of the USA Today network, though the Red Lion website linked to his LinkedIn profile was down, and Bolter said he was open to work. He also appeared as a speaker for a Minnesota nonprofit serving African immigrant communities. Minnesota Africans United, a nonprofit, said in a statement that Bolter participated in an August 2022 virtual webinar about trade and investment in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Bolter's participation as a speaker was facilitated by a third party, the statement said. He was never hired, paid or contracted by the nonprofit, which had no contact with him since the one-time appearance. A biography for the session described Bolter as having worked in Congo and for a security guard company. USA Today previously reported that a LinkedIn page believed to belong to Bolter showed he attended St. Cloud State University. University spokesperson Zach Dwyer confirmed Bolter graduated in 1996. David Carlson, 59, told Reuters he has been sharing a house in Minneapolis with Bolter for a little more than a year and last saw him the night of June 13th. At about 6 a.m. on June 14th, he received a text from Bolter. "He said that he might be dead soon," said Carlson, who called police. Carlson, who has known Bolter since 4th grade, said Bolter worked for an eye donation center and stayed at the house because it was close to his job. Federal authorities said the Bolter family home was in Green Isle, Minnesota, about 1 mile from where he was captured. The city of around 600 people is about an hour southwest of Minneapolis. Green Isle Mayor Shane Sheets said Bolter had no known political involvement or affiliation in the city. Under pressure, 7 Patriots players in the spotlight heading into training camp. By Jordy McElroy. Every player on the roster will have something to prove when the New England Patriots start training camp in July. Such is the case for a team with a new vision and direction under first-year coach Mike Vrabel. It will be a clean slate for players to prove they deserve a spot on the 53-man roster. However, some players will face significantly more pressure than others. For some, there are questions of scheme fit, while others could have their starting roles challenged by the many newcomers on the roster. There are also likely roster bubble players at positions already crowded with talent. Here are 7 Patriots players under the most pressure heading into the 2025 training camp. LB Jelani Tavai. Tavai suffered a calf injury during organized team activities. There's hope that he'll be ready to return by the start of training camp. The competition is fierce at linebacker with the arrival of Robert Spillane and continued improvements from Christian Ellis. Tavai's fit in Patriots coach Mike Vrabel's defense has been a question since the very beginning. R.B. Ramador Stevenson. Stevenson had a whopping 7 fumbles last season. He could end up playing backup to rookie running back Trevon Henderson if he fails to hold on to the ball this year. Henderson is a sure-handed triple threat option with the ability to run, receive, and pass protect. He is good enough to threaten Stevenson for snaps immediately. W.R. Jalen Polk. The Patriots have stacked the deck at wide receiver with 12 players currently on the roster at the position. That creates some uncertainty for even Jalen Polk, a 2024 second-round draft pick. If he isn't careful, he could get left in the dust as a surprise roster cut. He was a limited participant in minicamp due to an injury, which means training camp will be a make-or-break situation for the former Washington standout. S. Kyle Digger. The competition is heating up at safety with the arrival of rookie Craig Woodson, who looked impressive during the spring practices. Could he potentially push Kyle Duggar, who has looked shaky at times, for a starting role in the defensive backfield? It will be something to keep an eye on throughout training camp. Duggar signed a 4-year, $58 million extension with the Patriots last year, but one has to wonder if the team would consider moving him if he gets outplayed by Woodson. W.R. Javon Baker. If Jalen Polk is facing pressure, there should be no questions surrounding Javon Baker's standing with the team. He's another receiver currently on the roster bubble for the Patriots. The physical gifts are easy to see, but Baker hasn't been consistent enough in competitive reps. Like Polk, he will be facing a make-or-break situation in training camp. G. Cole Strange. Cole Strange is entering the final year of his rookie contract, and the Patriots are seemingly holding an open tryout for his starting left guard position. Granted, his importance to the team grew the moment veteran Wes Schweitzer was placed on their reserve retired list. However, there are still clear contenders at left guard, including rookie Jared Wilson, Sidey Rowe, Tyrese Robinson, Layden Robinson, and Jack Conley. And that's all I have time for. This is your reader, Robert Orr, saying thanks for listening.